All 33 ability cards in Red Dead Online ranked and explained. Let's begin with defensive ability cards. They have a blue color and usually are used for PvP, they're not really good for fighting NPCs. But there is one exception, it's a first ability card in this category called Fool Me Once. Each consecutive shot you take deals 10% less damage. By the way, here and later in this video I'm talking about level 3 ability cards. So if you will get shot for the first time, you will receive normal damage, second shot will deal 10% less damage, third 20% less damage, and fourth shot will deal 30% less damage, which is a maximum amount for this ability card. And by the way, it doesn't matter if only one enemy is shooting you or multiple different enemies. If you're not gonna get shot for 10 seconds, this effect will reset. Anyway, it's a great ability card for both PvP and PvE, because 30% damage reduction is really a lot, it's the highest amount you can get from one ability card in Red Dead Online. Fool Me Once will really help you to fight other players, especially in the sniper battles or when you're using a tank build, you know, by combining different defensive ability cards like Slow and Steady, Sharpshooter and so on. And it's also really great for PvE because when you're fighting multiple NPCs, you will all the time have this 30% damage reduction, because NPCs, especially on the longer distances, will hit you quite often but will do just a little bit of damage. Next we have Friends for Life ability card, which grants you and your horse 10% damage reduction when you are mounted. It's an absolutely useless ability card even if you for some reason like fighting while mounted, because 10% damage reduction for a player is not much, you can get the same amount or higher from different other ability cards. And also it will not actually protect your horse, because in PvE most likely enemies will not kill your horse anyways, and in PvP this 10% will not protect your horse from a sniper rifle or dynamite arrow, it will be dead anyway. And I'm not even mentioning that fighting other players while mounted is not a great idea because it makes you an easy target, so don't waste your money on this ability card. Next we have Strength in Numbers. It gives extra damage reduction for each ally nearby, maximum 20% for 3 allies, but they have to be relatively close to you. And that's really the problem, because 20% damage reduction is a lot, but you will be able to use this ability card only in certain situations, like in PvP modes where you know that there will be constantly at least few teammates nearby, and maybe in some PvE like small call to arms maps, for example Saint Denis Graveyard. So it's a B tier ability card. It's fine but very situational, you're not gonna be able to use it effectively too often. Next we have Hunker Down ability card, which grants 20% damage reduction while you take in cover. By the way, did you know that while in cover you also regenerate health much faster? And again, 20% is a lot, but the problem is players don't really take cover too often in Red Dead Online. It's not Red Dead Redemption 1 Online and not even Red Dead Redemption 2 Story. In Red Dead Online it's not necessary to take cover because there are powerful ability cards and tonics. Plus in many situations you will not be able to take cover at all, for example in a free roam fights with other players that will quite often happen somewhere in an open field. Anyway, Hunker Down is a tier C ability card. Next is To Fight Another Day ability card, which grants around 10% damage reduction while sprinting. And 10% is simply not enough, plus you cannot combine To Fight Another Day with Slow and Steady to make a tank build, because you cannot sprint while Slow and Steady is active. So it's a tier C, and only because you might use it in some slippery bastard builds. Next we have the Unblinking Eye, which is not a defensive ability card, but for some reason is in this category. Unblinking Eye reduces Deadeye and Eagle Eye drain rates, so it will be helpful not only for fighting but also for something like searching for collectible items or treasure chests. But Unblinking Eye has one problem, it works well only with certain Deadeye ability cards, because it only decreases the rate with which players are spending Deadeye bar while Deadeye is active. But it's not the only way players are losing Deadeye bar in Red Dead Online. For example, Painted Black ability card also uses Deadeye for each shot on a marked targets, and Slow and Steady ability card uses additional Deadeye each time when you taking damage. And this is not affected by Unblinking Eye at all, so I would say it's an A tier ability card. It's a must-have for Slippery Bastard, will be pretty useful for something like Focus Fire or Quiet and Inspiration, but it's not extremely helpful when you're using Painted Black or Slow and Steady, which are the most popular Deadeye ability cards in Red Dead Online. Take the Pain Away, very weird ability card. When you revive someone, it gives 20% damage reduction for you and for that person you revived for 8 seconds. But reviving is not happening too often in both PvP and PvE, so most of the time you will not have any bonus from this ability card at all. Plus you are an easy target when reviving, so in PvP it's a really dangerous move. Anyway, Take the Pain Away is just a terrible card, and if you will spend money on it, no one will take your pain away. Next ability card is called Of Single Purpose, and probably it's because it has really only one purpose. In Red Dead Online, only one build in which you can potentially use it. It grants 10% damage reduction when player is unarmed or using a melee weapon. Lasso and bolas also counts. So it can be really used only in some weird, slippery, busted melee builds in PvP, and even that 10% is not that much. That's why Of Single Purpose is a tier C at best. Next ability card is really interesting. It's called Never Without One, and it protects you from one headshot when you're wearing a hat or a hood from a garment set. But after such headshot, hat falls off. Back in beta, Never Without One was protecting from all headshots, but then Rockstar nerfed it, and now it protects only from headshots to the upper half of the head. Additionally, when you have a hat equipped, it grants 10% damage reduction, but after losing a hat, you start receiving more damage, around 15%. Never Without One is a tier A ability card. It's absolutely useless in PvE, because with rare exceptions NPCs are not making headshots, but in PvP it's really helpful. It's quite often will save you when someone unexpectedly attacks you, and overall protection from headshots is a really useful thing, especially since there is a weird glitch, and when you're using Beaver garment set, even when the hat will fall off, you can re-equip the hood in the middle of a fight. It works only for male characters, but female characters can do pretty much the same with posse outfits. Now let's talk about recovery ability cards. They have a green color and are mostly used for PvE, so fighting NPCs. The first card in this category is called Come Back Stronger, and ironically it will not make you stronger, because it grants faster health regeneration rate, and also regeneration starts faster after taking damage, and yes, it works. But the problem is, health regenerates too slowly even with this ability card, and no one relies on a natural health regeneration in Red Dead Online. If you get wounded, you need to drink tonic or use other ability cards that restore health bar much more effectively. So in practice, Come Back Stronger is just useless for both PvP and PvE. Next ability card is called Iron Lung, and this one is actually used quite often by Red Dead Online's players. It helps you to regenerate stamina bar faster, which nobody cares about, but also it grants players damage reduction depending on how much stamina they have. Maximum amount is 10% when stamina bar is full, but drinking stamina tonic will not give extra damage reduction. Anyway, 10% is not that much, but unless you are running all the time or using something like a melee build, most of the time you will have full stamina in this damage reduction. That's why Iron Lung is quite often used in a tank build. I would say it's a tier A ability card because it's pretty solid for PvP and quite often used for fighting other players, but has no value in PvE at all. Next we have Kick in the Butt. Each time when players are taking damage, some percentage of this damage is converted into Deadeye. But the problem is, even taking a lot of damage will not grant you that much of Deadeye, as you can see here. So in practice, this ability card can be good only for PvP for players who are dying more than they are killing. It will save some Deadeye tonics for them, but in all other cases, players should rather restore the Deadeye bar with help of tonics, making kills and other ability cards that we're gonna talk about later. You might think that I'm talking about our next ability card that is called Live for the Fight, which regenerates Deadeye bar slowly over time. But I was not speaking about this one, because this one is bad as well. Because it works, but it regenerates Deadeye extremely slowly. It will take more than 5 minutes to fully restore Deadeye bar, even if you have a fortified Deadeye core. It's a tier C ability card, it has no real use in both PvP and PvE, but you might think about using it for something like a collector role, where you don't expect fighting too much. Next we have an ability card for your horse, it's called Ride Like the Wind. With help of this ability card, you can restore some amount of your horse health and stamina each time when you dealing or taking damage. More when you dealing damage, but it doesn't matter, this card is absolutely useless. Because remember, your horse will die in PvP anyway, and in PvE will be fine most of the time. And you will almost never need to restore horse stamina if you have an Akudocha saddle with best stirrups or even other good saddle like Upland. Anyway, this ability card is completely useless, so moving to the next one. It's peak condition and it's one of my favorite ability cards actually. But surprisingly, despite being in recovery category, that's actually a PvP ability card. It grants players extra damage depending on the stamina level. With full stamina, players are getting maximum bonus, a little less than 10% of extra damage. And again, fortifying stamina bar by drinking a tonic is not increasing this amount. As a side effect, peak condition decreases sprinting cost of running with acceleration. By the way, players are also using stamina when jumping like this, but it's not affected by peak condition for some reason. Anyway, peak condition is not really useful for PvE, but in PvP it can be used in many different damage builds. And for example, if you're using Korkana rifle, the best weapon in this game, and want to make sure that it will kill enemies without tonics or defensive ability cards with only one body shot, it will be necessary to use 2 damage ability cards, and great choice here would be Sharpshooter plus peak condition. Next we have Eye for an Eye ability card, which additionally restores 10% of Deadeye bar when you killing enemies with a headshot. I said additionally because you already restored 10% for killing enemies without any ability cards. If you know how to make headshots in Red Dead Online, Eye for an Eye is just an awesome card, especially for PvE. It can be used in some forms of PvP like PvP Showdown series, but usually in PvP players are using defensive or damage ability cards and restoring health and Deadeye with help of tonics. But you don't want to spend so many tonics when fighting NPCs, so Eye for an Eye will be a great choice for Deadeye management. Next we have the Gift of Focus ability card that increases effect of items, tonics and abilities, for example Eye for an Eye or Live for the Fight, that restore Deadeye bar. You're gonna be getting around 20% more Deadeye from these sources, and it sounds like a decent ability card, and you might use it with Eye for an Eye to never drink tonics at all, but in my opinion it's just a little bit of an overkill. It's not making that much of a difference on practice, but takes an ability card slot, where you would rather have some other ability card, for example Strange Medicine. It's basically a vampiric regeneration. Each time when you making damage, you taking % of that damage and add it to your health bar. Also, when you have this ability card equipped, your health passively regenerates on a twice slower rate, but no one really cares about this. Strange Medicine can be used in some PvP builds, but still it's mostly a PvE ability card and a really good one. Just like Eye for an Eye will help you to save a lot of Deadeye tonics, Strange Medicine will help you to save a lot of health tonics. Cold-Blooded is our next ability card, and it regenerates around 10% of a health bar over 3 seconds after killing an enemy. By the way, this rate is not decreased by a negative effect from Strange Medicine ability card, so you can combine these 2 ability cards in your PvE builds. But Cold-Blooded is absolutely useless in PvP, and in PvE I still prefer Strange Medicine a little more, so quite often I'm replacing Cold-Blooded with Fool Me Once or other ability cards. But still it's a solid A tier. And now let's talk about combat or damage ability cards. They have yellow color and obviously are mostly used for PvP. First card in this category is called Gunslinger's Choice. It's an ability card for dual wielding. While using double pistols or revolvers, you will be doing 10% more damage and increased accuracy, which is really good, but the thing is, if you're using Painted Black ability card, you don't really care about increased accuracy because you will get maximum accuracy anyway, even without marking targets. We're gonna talk about this later. So with Painted Black, Gunslinger's Choice is an overkill, because you already don't care about the accuracy and 10% of extra damage is not that much. But still, this ability card can be useful in many builds that are not using Painted Black Deadeye ability card, even in PvE builds because of extra accuracy. But still, there is a big problem. Gunslinger's Choice is not affecting your main weapons, and you mostly gonna be using main weapons to kill enemies. So it's a tier B. Next we have Horseman ability card, and obviously with this ability card card, you are dealing more damage while mounted. And do I even need to tell you that this ability card is pretty useless, because not too often you will be fighting on your horse, and even if you will, your horse will die, and then what? And the bonus damage is not that impressive. I mean, if it was like 50% of extra damage while mounted, then maybe, but now it's just a waste of money and ability card slot. Next we have a Sharpshooter, one of the best cards in this category. It grants you extra damage and damage reduction, 20% both, when you're using a scope. So with sniper rifles, so actually you can install a scope on regular repeaters and rifles. But keep in mind that you will receive bonus only when you're looking through a scope. Just having a scope on your weapon is not enough. Having 20% of both extra damage and damage reduction is just awesome. So it's a great ability card for PvP, especially since sniper rifles are extremely strong in Red Dead Online's PvP. But you also can use it in PvE if you're using sniper rifles only. The next ability card is called Necessity Breeds. It grants you increased damage depending on a health that you're missing. So less health you have, the more damage you do. Maximum bonus is around 20%, which is pretty high, but the problem is, on average, you're not gonna get too much of extra damage from this ability card, simply because you will not be in a situation where you have almost no health too often, and even if you will be, you will either die pretty quickly or will drink a tonic, and will not get a bonus from Necessity Breeds in any way, so it's an absolutely useless ability card. Next we have Landon's Patience. You are dealing extra damage depending on a time spent between shots. The more time went from your previous shot, the more damage you will make. Landon's Patience grants 1.33% of extra damage for each second of waiting, with maximum 20% of extra damage when waiting for 15 seconds since the previous shot or more. By the way, it will also grant you maximum bonus if you were not shooting at all, so for example you just logged in into the game or just equipped this ability card. Anyway, Landon's Patience is a relatively good ability card for PvP, especially if you're using some weapons with high damage like sniper rifles. But still, in the middle of a fight there never will be 15 or even 10 or even 5 seconds between shots. So I personally prefer using something like Peak Condition instead for more stable extra damage. Next ability card is called the Short Game, and it gives 20% extra damage on a pretty small range up to 5 steps, but when distance to the target increases, this extra damage drops. It's really small around 10 steps, there is no bonus at all when it's around 20 steps to the target, and on a longer distances you're actually dealing 10% less damage. So to be honest, this ability card can be good only for some melee builds, and no, it's not good even for shotguns, because if you will manage to get really close to the target, you will kill the target anyway, and if for some reason you need this extra damage, rather use Winning Streak, which, as we will see later, works exceptionally well with shotguns. So it's a tier C, and only because, yeah, you can use it for some fun melee only builds. Next we have Hangman ability card, and this one is pretty simple. It deals damage every second when you use lasso on your enemy. It even works on animals, but it ruins the belt and carcass quality. Anyway, this ability card is absolutely useless on practice, and I guess only griefers who want to troll and additionally humiliate their victims are using it. And the last ability card in this category is called Winning Streak, and it grants you extra damage for each consecutive shot that you making. Description says each consecutive shot on the same target, but on practice no, you can hit any target. But the bonus resets if you will miss your shot or if you will not do any damage in the next 10 seconds. In theory, Winning Streak should grant you 10% of extra damage for each consecutive shot up to 100% extra damage. But on practice it works weirdly. First shot gives no extra damage, like it should. Second shot within 10 seconds gives 10% extra damage, fine here, but the third shot already deals 30% extra damage. Then 50, and shot number 6 deals 100% damage. It's a maximum amount. One interesting detail: when you're using a shotgun, every single pellet counts as an individual shot. So if you will hit your target with all the pellets, for example with help of Painted Black ability card, you will receive solid bonus even on the first shot. So yeah, it's an extremely strong ability when you need to deal a lot of damage, in PvP when fighting against tank builds for example, or in PvE when hunting legendary animals. But to use it effectively Essentially, you have to be sure that you will not be missing your shots. And the last category is Deadeye abilities that are using Deadeye bar and are basically ultimate abilities in Red Dead Online. First ability card here is called A Moment To Recuperate. It heals you relatively fast while Deadeye is active, but taking damage stops healing, so you can only effectively use it in between fights or while taking cover. And since there are multiple ways of restoring your health while you are fighting, like tonics or other ability cards, I think this ability card is almost useless. It's a tier C and only in some cases you might use it for PvE. Next we have Focus Fire, which grants around 20% of extra damage to all your teammates while active, even if your teammates are on the other side of the map, by the way. If multiple players in a team will have Focus Fire, effect will not stack. Since Focus Fire gives extra damage for you as well, you can use it in some maximum damage builds for both PvP and PvE, even if you're playing solo. But for group PvP, it's almost a must-have. At least one group member should have this ability card. Usually it's gonna be the one who's not the best at shooting and almost playing as a support. But anyway, extra 20% damage for the whole team is really good, so it's a solid A tier ability card. The next ability card is extremely good for everything: fighting other players, fighting NPCs or hunting. It's called Painted Black. And by the way, you can receive first level of this ability card for free during tutorial or right after skipping tutorial. Painted Black automatically marks targets at which you are aiming, and then you shoot all the targets without missing. But each shot will use a little bit of Deadeye bar. But that's not all. Painted Black has one hidden bonus. While it's active, it grants you maximum achievable accuracy, basically removes bloom from all the weapons. Not when you're marking targets, but simply when Deadeye is active. Long time ago, all Deadeye ability cards were granting this extra bonus, but then Rockstar nerfed them all except for Painted Black for some reason. And now it's the best ability card for almost all situations, because accuracy is so important. Keep in mind that you cannot mark some targets with Painted Black, for example players in defensive mode, but they will not be able to mark you as well, or legendary animals. However, even for hunting legendary animals, Painted Black will be useful because of the accuracy bonus, especially if you will be using a shotgun. By the way, next ability card can also help you to hunt legendary animals, despite being mostly a PvP ability card. I'm talking about Slow and Steady. While it's active, all headshots that you will receive are dealing normal, not increased damage, and also you have 20% damage reduction. But each time when you will be taking damage while Slow and Steady is active, you will lose some additional Deadeye bar. Another negative side effect is that you cannot sprint while this ability card is active. That's why it's called Slow and Steady. Slow and Steady is a must-have ability card for a tank build, where you stack different defensive abilities. Tank builds are really useless in PvE, but can and are often used in PvP. But Slow and Steady has one side effect. While it's active, your horse will not throw you off, because horse cannot run as well, and it will be really useful when hunting different predators, especially dangerous legendary animals. But you need to activate Deadeye before the animal will roar, or it will not work. Anyway, since you can use Slow and Steady in both PvP and sometimes in PvE, it's a solid A tier ability card. Quite an inspiration Deadeye ability card. Just like A Moment To Recuperate, it heals you when Deadeye is active, but it also heals all your team members on any distance, and again, if other team members will be using quite an inspiration as well, effect will not stack. Additionally, receiving damage is not stopping the healing, unlike with A Moment To Recuperate, but the healing rate is twice slower than with that card. Anyway, this ability card is not that useful when you're playing solo. It's much more effective to restore health with help of tonics or other ability cards like Strange Medicine. But I would say that it's a tier B, because when you're playing in a big group, you can use this ability card in both PvP and PvE. The last ability card is called Slippery Bastard, and this one is really controversial. When Deadeye is active, it decreases accuracy of enemies who are shooting at you, but also decreases your accuracy. So basically it gives your weapon maximum bloom possible. By the way, before Red Dead Redemption was released on PC, this ability card worked differently, and it was disabling auto-aim for both you and your enemies. It was kinda fun. Anyway, Slippery Bastard uses Deadeye on a much faster rate than other Deadeye ability cards. That's why you will have to either use a lot of tonics or combine Slippery Bastard Busted with Unblinking Eye, probably both. But it's not the biggest problem with this ability card. The real problem is Slippery Bastard is super easy to counter. Because yes, it's almost impossible to hit enemies that are using Slippery Bastard with most firearms on a longer distances, even if you will use Painted Black. But it's not decreasing accuracy of scoped weapons, so snipers will kill you immediately. And also it will not help against bolas, throwing weapons like tomahawks and arrows. So if your opponents know how Slippery Bastard ability card works, they will leave you no chance. In PvE, Slippery Bastard is actually much more effective, because NPCs are rarely using sniper rifles or throwing weapons, so they will be missing you while you're gonna be killing them with sniper rifle. But still it works weird. At first it was working fine against NPCs, then at some point I guess Rockstar broke it and it was not working, at least in missions where I was testing Slippery Bastard against NPCs, and now it works fine again, so keep it in mind. Anyway, it's a tier B ability card since you can use it in some PvE situations, but for PvP it's a complete waste of money. By the way, if you don't want to waste money not only on ability cards but on useless weapons as well, I suggest you to go and check the video that you can see on your screen now. It's about must-have weapons in Red Dead Online. And with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay safe, stay healthy, goodbye.